What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a book this week.
I watched a mini-series. This week we're doing Little Fires Everywhere. It's a mini-series on Hulu starring the amazing Reese Witherspoon, Kerry Washington, and showrunner Liz Tigler.
And the book is written by Celeste Ng.
Interesting that she's been having kind of, I guess, they've been saying a moment over the last 2 years. And this book came out and kind of, to use the title, caught fire really quickly. And all of this business with the show moved really, really, really quickly. And it's been premiering on Hulu weekly, I think, over the last several weeks. We're still in the middle of it now. I've seen up through episode 3, and I've read beyond that. But I don't know really anything about Celeste.
Right.
Because, outright, this show just covers an amazing amount of topics.
Yeah.
Help me do this, Taylor. This is a book about a low-income, in the show, African-American family. In the book, a nondescript white family, homeless, move into Shaker, which is the uppity, upscale white suburbia, where
in the 90s,
in the height of the peak 90s, where the kind of the town mom, the upstanding family, their mom, rents out a property to this lower income family.
Yes.
It's just a mother and daughter. And then the daughter starts hanging out with the white mother's kids. She has 2 sons, an older, a younger, and 2 daughters.
Right. So it is basically the clash between these two families and the supposed order that exists in Shaker Heights and the chaos that is brought in by this artistic other sort of person who seems like they don't belong
mysterious
there.
Person, different way of life.
Right.
And so it's the idea of like, well, this is how life is, and this is what we live for, and the way I live my life. And then somebody comes in that really is challenging that, and it's so peculiar.
Right. And in the midst of that, there is the scandal and mystery surrounding who this family is that has just moved in and why they are potentially on the run from something. You get a piece of that. There is a scandal involving one of her co-workers that has to do with a child adoption and who it belongs to. There is scandal about abortion that then gets put under somebody else's name so that you don't know who is actually one of the high school.
This all opens with a house blazing on fire, and then it cuts and to tell you how we got to that point.
Right.
So there's we get to the. I'm 3 episodes in. I've read beyond that. I don't know who burned down the house. I don't even know that yet. But there's so much going on to I think that is the ultimate idea of like, well, who burned down the house ultimately is the big question. And we're not going to be spoiling down that here. We're not going to be going to the ends of the earth with this plot, but we will be going in for a moment. And this is going to be a normal episode, but the plot of this is particularly dense. We just wanted to warn you guys.
Yeah.
Anyway,
production. How did this come to be? We're starting with one of the main actresses, Reese Witherspoon. She started a production company with her own money, and the big thing that she turned to was books in order to get these projects off the ground, because she had a lull in the late 2000s in her career, and people were like, oh, she's done. She's washed up. She's in her late 30s. What is she going to do?
Blind and then kind of fell through the wayside. But then I guess like right around 2013, 14, she really started to turn the tide. And I remember Wild being like one of the first things hot on the scene. 2014, I think. I saw that in the theaters. Incredibly moving, a wonderful performance, wildly conflicting. But I think this is all born out of that kind of energy, right?
Yeah, she had been reading books and things had been sent to her that were not even yet published. So the first one,
oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, one of the first. I don't think it was through her company, but she was involved. She was one of the producers. Was Gone Girl.
Oh, I didn't realize she was a producer on Gone
she was
Girl.
on that, and then Wild, like you said, Wild came immediately after, and she was the star. And then she optioned a novel by Leanne Moriarty called Big Little Lies.
Right, and I haven't seen that. That's on HBO. Well, it's in past 2 seasons now. Meryl Streep was involved with it, I think, in the most recent season. That's something I've been waiting to get to. I haven't been able to. I really want to, though.
Nicole Kidman was also a co-producer on that, and so that set them off to the races of being like, oh,
hot.
Which is
and it was huge.
Also, their whole take on it is like, we're trying to make stories by women, for women, about women, having to do with nothing but that. So that Hello Sunshine is the name of her company. And I'll post a link to the interview I saw in Vanity Fair, very exhaustive about that whole thing. She's also very, very interested in collaborating. Like the whole situation was, oh, we're going to have a bidding war between what production company is going to do Big Little Lies. And then she's like, well, why don't we just make it together?
Oh.
And so then it ended up being
made. What a crazy idea. Maybe we can join teams.
Right. And she is very quick to give praise to other people. In this interview, people don't realize she was pregnant when she was in that movie Election that came out. And she had her first baby at 23.
Oh, okay.
She plays a high schooler in that movie, but she was pregnant during that whole production process. And the interviewer said, like, I can't think of anybody else who did that, who had that. And immediately Reese Witherspoon is like, oh, Kate Winslet. She was 25. She had a baby after Titanic.
Oh, my gosh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, we talked all the time about it. So that was like, oh, here's something that nobody knows, that she's just like been tight with people in the industry. Like she is one of the OG people and isn't just rising from the ashes. She's always been involved.
Right. She's always been there.
Yeah. So Celeste Ng was watching Big Little Lies in 2017. She said, oh, this seems like something that Reese could do. So she sent an advance copy of Little Fires Everywhere. It hadn't been released yet. So similar, she knows what Reese is doing. So she took that risk, sent that book out and said, hey, would you be interested in this?
Just on a whim. That's real. You never know.
So an executive,
I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I've got a book.
I'm writing it. It's not out yet. So an executive producer at Reese's production company read it, turned it on to Reese. They were like, let's do it.
Okay. All right. I see.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, this is such a dynamic, multifaceted story. To me, the author is certainly reaching from some sort of past experiences, but there's a lot in there that it seems like pontification to me, just at a bird's eye view. So I'm really curious to understand a little bit more about Celeste and where this stuff really emerged from.
Yeah. She grew up in this town called Shaker Heights, which is in Ohio, close to Cleveland.
So the Shaker Heights in the book is a real place.
Yes, it is a real place, and that is based on her life experience growing up there. I think they moved there when she was 10 and lived the rest of her childhood there.
Shaker Heights in the show has this kind of looming, it's almost a character in of itself, almost like a Stephen King book, like Dewberry and It or something. It very much is a living, breathing community that kind of looms over the drama with the characters that we're watching. The high school is like very much a centerpiece of just like where these characters are orbiting around.
Yeah. Shaker Heights comes about I looked up a little bit about the history of it. 1912 was a planned community, one of the first in the U.S.
Oh.
Shakers were kind of like the Quakers, one of those old Puritan type communities where they're more religious looking. But their whole thing was about order, planning, structures, specificity. Wasn't necessarily about diversity and equality at the start. That came about in the 50s and 60s when the community, then it became a model for that, but in sort of an underhanded way, inclusive to feel, right, like progressive, oh, we're good, without actually feeling like Celeste says in an interview, she's like, there's a tendency to pat yourself on the back and go, I'm one of the good ones. You actually have the same blind spots as everybody else.
Right.
Just because you did it doesn't mean that you feel that or that you're really actually doing anything good for anybody. This sort of underhanded altruism.
I was listening to an interview with Celeste when she was talking about the 90s and the idea to be culturally appropriate, to be politically correct at the time. Almost the idea was to be race blind, to pretend almost as if the system does not act differently towards people of color.
Or that cannot be a part of your identity.
Right. Just an invisibility there. Though we're the same, but we're actually not. And that's the problem that I think that a lot of this is trying to convey, is that there is a difference. We need to acknowledge the difference, see the difference, which we have. I mean, it's been 20 years, but that's so ingrained in the root of the drama. It felt very authentic to me. It's unsettling almost in a way, seeing my childhood in a lot of ways up on the screen, and people I would have known, seeing it back at me with the conflict in it. And I'm like, man, we have over 20 years. This is such a crazy conversation, the race conversation in America and how it's portrayed in film and television. To actually see something just from 25 years ago This is the period in which I was raised,
Right.
being shown to me on television.
And a big,
very peculiar.
a big criticism of the show that I've seen versus the book is that they do change it where the two competing mothers and daughters situations that are going on in the story, in the book, they are not different races. They are both white families, and it's more about class. Celeste says she found it interesting that so many people read it as Mia, this character, and Pearl, her daughter, being a woman of color. Initially, she said she wanted to in the writing process. She didn't because she didn't want to make her an Asian woman because that ties in with another storyline that happens later on. And she didn't want to pretend like she could imagine what a Black or Latina woman's experience would be like in this country.
Interesting.
So she was like, she's just going to be a working class white woman. But then with the show, people are like, oh, it's so on the nose commentary on this. And it's like, well, she wanted to do that, but didn't have the capacity. Now you have a writer's room of diverse people who understand that experience.
I was able to find where they made the decision actually to make the lower income family African American. And I thought it was really, really fascinating. But we're not quite to that. That ties directly in with the other storyline.
But
we're almost there.
Back to Shaker Heights and a little bit of where Celeste is coming from with this and where she grew up. Like I said, it was a planned community. That means everything they're trying to make exactly perfect, which sounds dystopian in a way, or a weird utopia.
And it is. I mean, that's kind of the point. Is it like maybe it is a little, a little bit,
which ties into the main. Mrs. Richardson is the lady,
the Reese Witherspoon,
the Reese Witherspoon character, and her obsession with everything has to be just so. Because literally, this is true. The color of the houses, there's like an order whether or not your house is in a certain place in the town, so that it matches, but it's different. Like it is a certain color, but it doesn't clash. So the city gives you a list of approved things that your house can be. The city, if you don't mow your lawn, they will mow the lawn for you and then send you a bill. There's no garbage cans because you leave your garbage cans at the back of the house. The garbage truck comes up and then there's a little dude on a golf cart who drives back to get the cans, puts them in, and then puts the cans back in the house because it's unsightly to have all the cans strewn about.
Whoa, that's
on the road.
The definition of extra.
Yeah.
That's so extra.
Yeah. So this is the town that Celeste is growing up in. Her dad is a NASA physicist, or was a NASA physicist, and her mom was a chemist at Cleveland State University. But she was saying when she was growing up here, she was a part of a student group on race relations, like as a effort by the school system where as a high schooler she visited elementary schools and they talked about discrimination and stereotyping. Reminds me like of the DARE program, but instead of talking about drugs, it's talking about these other
race
societal things. So she was like, I
wonder how I would have taken that, a racial DARE officer
right,
coming around to like grow my empathy and grow my point of view.
And that's
that
where
she's fascinating.
Yeah, that's where she's saying, she's like, I didn't see any of this stuff when I was a kid because there were these potentially good efforts to make people aware that like, yeah, we're living in a weird place, but we're trying to fix why it was created in the first place. So she never thought of writing being her career either, because that's the most artistic, bizarre, it's like basket weaving for full time. Like you have to be really out there.
Yeah.
And based on her upbringing, that's not the case. But she majored in English at Harvard, got her master's at Michigan, and then took 6 years from graduating to publish the first book, which was Everything I Never Told You.
When did that come out?
That came out in 2014.
Okay.
And this is the reason she blew up, because that was her first book. She had just been publishing short fiction here and there.
Yeah.
But it was Amazon's 2014 Book of the Year.
Wow.
So it just exploded. And then her second book, which is Little Fires Everywhere, which came out in 2017, was Amazon's #2 Book of the Year for 2017.
Wow.
So they really pushed her, their editorial department.
I'm so curious as to how those things happen. I'm so curious as to how artists find an audience. And I was listening to the same interview I listened to where she was talking about in that realm, there seems to be a kind of an author for each thing. And this is race, or this is down to just what flavor are you looking for, and it seems to be the way of the business has been is, well, there is already a Chinese author,
right? She
says you either have to knock them out, or so that's the competition. So how do you combat that?
Right. She says she gets all the time. She's like, "Oh, you're the next Amy Tan." She's like, just because
Right, that's
Amy
really
yeah.
limiting. That's like,
Also, what
can
we're
I
writing
be
about,
me and can I be on my own? You know, like,
or we're not even writing about the same kind of things.
yeah, like how applicable is it? Like, honestly. Like, well, you could write wildly different things. You come from the same, maybe ethnicity at some place down the line, but good Lord, why are we putting a ceiling on it?
Or saying there can only be one because people only have the capacity to think about that.
It's the marketing and ads and agencies trying to package artists and that kind of stuff. It's all about consolidation. It's just a shame. And I think now that we're realizing there's more room for more stories and we need more stories. The more stories we have, the more point of view that we can actually get, the bigger our empathy gets. So we can't shut stories like this out at the door. We have to see what people actually went through.
There is one situation that I found, which I'll post a link because she wrote this when she was in college or very shortly after college, which she had been sitting on for a while. There was a situation that happened when she was in high school. It was a friend that she had in high school, sort of close, was in the drama, club together and whatnot. They went their separate ways. She was in the middle of sophomore year in college at Harvard, and this girl had gone missing from Shaker Heights. And she was found 3 weeks later, murdered in a trailer.
Oh my God. Good
and so there was a race component to it as well.
Oh no.
And there were a lot of people taking different sides because the guy got death row. And so white supremacists were using it as a platform to be like, "Oh, see, this is look at everything we said is true. These people are bad, and they're killing random white, that kind of thing."
What was the race element of this?
Because it was a black guy.
It was a black guy that killed a white girl. I see.
Yeah, and they had worked together at a diner or something like that, and it was his trailer and everything. So then they were on that side, but then he had gotten death row, and her parents were completely on the other end, and they were like, "We don't believe in the death penalty. We don't want this guy to be killed for this." And everybody that was on the anti or pro death row side was like, "Look at these stupid parents. What a bunch of idiots. Why would they?" So it got embroiled in all of these other questions that had nothing to do with this girl's life at all. She just became the piece for all of these other conflicts.
Hold on. So what you have just laid out sounds like a whole other show that is just as rich and multifaceted as this show, but totally different. What you just pitched is like making a murderer is like True Detective, and this is definitely the party of five in the same town. So how does she go? How does this happen? And it actually spark her to go the way she went, which is much more interpersonal drama than something as town stopping as a murder. That it seems like there's part of me going, but like, well, why didn't she write the murder trial where all the stuff gets lost through the process? And instead she went for the really introspective, well, who am I really in the eyes of my mother? Who am I really in the eyes of my daughter story?
Well, like I said, she had written a whole article piece about this girl. It's called Captioning Emily, and I'll post a link to it in our show notes if you want to read it, because she sat on this for a long time because it happened when she was in college.
Wow. I would have never guessed, honestly. But I mean, the story certainly has things where you go, "Oh, that's super real," I know that they must have known somebody just like. I would have never guessed that this is spurring off of the loss of not even a friend who got lost in the middle of their own their own town's pursuit of justice.
And maybe it is or isn't, but I saw in this interview that she had definitely wrestled with it.
If you want to talk about Shaker, that, I mean, good Lord, that's something you just don't go through in every town. So that's wild.
Yeah. So the big conflict then that takes place in the book Little Fires Everywhere and the show is not murder, but it has to do with this adoption situation.
The low-income mother Mia works at the Chinese restaurant where she meets another Chinese waitress who has, quote-unquote, lost a daughter. There's a huge hole in her heart there that Mia is drawn to. how did it happen in the book that she ended up losing her daughter?
It's kind of a postpartum depression. She's not able to nurse. She doesn't have the resources. She doesn't even know where to go. Believes she can have. There's a language barrier.
In the store, she's thrown out of a store because she's a little bit short change paying for baby formula, and she's just thrown out like scum while she's like holding her screaming baby. It's obviously,
right, so
that's the level. Her baby ends up being left at the firehouse.
Yeah, she leaves it there.
So I'm curious about how this goes down, because the particulars of this are important for the discussion of the politic of this after the fact.
Right. And that's the question that Celeste tries to bring to the book, which was something I talked a little bit about, Evan, before when we were discussing our notes, and the fact that a lot of people praise the book in the sense that nobody comes out of it with totally clean hands, according to Celeste, and saying there's nobody a villain or a hero. She didn't want somebody who was clearly the mustache twirling evil person. But I think that the issue that I take with it is it's like there's so much going on that I did feel like she was leading us in a direction. And there's a lot of situations where it's like, oh, this person does feel this way, but they acted this way. But it is kind of a tragedy because I feel like we just get the pieces of that and nobody really grows. Or she's pushing you one way at one point and then pushing you another way. And it's like, well, you already started me off with this person. Right. So I feel bad for the bougie white woman because she seems so evil, and it's like, well, I just want her to change. Yeah. But at the same time, here is this Chinese mother who has left her kid at the firehouse because she can't care for it.
Yeah.
But also this kid then gets raised for a year and given to a family who does want to adopt this kid.
The baby gets given to a family in Shaker, a well-off family.
Right.
And the Reese Witherspoon character is throwing a birthday party for her friends who are raising this now adopted Chinese baby. It's the 1-year birthday, to which she brings along Mia, the African-American, or the middle class worker. She brings her along to photograph the birthday. And this is where Mia realizes that the baby that she's here to photograph is the baby that her coworker lost a year ago and hasn't seen. That is going to set off most of the end of, the trajectory of this plot for the rest of the series is going to be the battle between the actual mother and the adoptive parents. It's not a legitimate adoption, but and that's why it's so muddy, is that this is a particular case that isn't really how these things happen.
Right.
And this is even commenting on a craze that was really emerging throughout the 1990s, a white, affluent parents seeking out, children from Asia or around the globe. Lion, the movie that came out a few years ago, is about this exact thing, about an adoptive boy who loses his brother and then tries to reconnect with his whole family.
So speaking to what you said about these high-profile cases regarding child custody in the 90s, I did find one that this is explicitly the counter to, which most people would know, Baby Jessica. So there are two Baby Jessicas, if we're confused. One of them was Baby Jessica. She fell into a well in Texas in '87, took 56 hours to get her out. Reagan was like, everybody is the mother and father of Baby Jessica. It was a whole media frenzy.
I don't remember this one at all. This must be where all the baby fell down a well things came from. I didn't know any of that.
Not this one. There was another Baby Jessica situation that took place in Michigan, and it was
this is about affluent, white people trying to adopt out.
So, there was these two families, the DeBoers, and then the couple that had the baby, Kara Clausen and Dan Schmidt. So Kara had the baby and was giving it up for adoption. She put a false name of the dad. So not Dan Schmidt's name. He didn't even know it was his baby.
Oh, no.
She changed her mind 5 days after the DeBoers had gone through with the adoption. The thing was, she had already done it, so she could not get the maternal rights back. But Dan Schmidt could, because it was literally his baby. So
he
then
had no idea. He never had a chance. Yeah.
So he did not relinquish the paternal rights. So they stopped all the proceedings to get the adoption fully into play. Because like I said, it was only 5 days after she had the baby. Then the case, what became of it wasn't even about the paternal rights. It was what is in the best interest of the child. So do you have the DeBoers, who is this family who wanted to adopt, versus this lower class parentage who didn't even know whose baby was, the whole thing.
That's why is who can take care of it the better
Right.
Why did that become the central argument there of who can take care of it better? I mean, I think legally the father has some leg to stand on there if he has no knowledge of the child and it's been given away without his like that.
So that's
actually a legal route. But I think part of the larger point of this whole thing is people getting lost in the details when something else happens. That seems really interesting to me. And this,
well, I have to correct myself. I have to correct myself because I'm sorry. The case went for the Kara Clausen and Dan Schmidt. They did get baby Jessica back, so it didn't go with the adoptive family.
Okay,
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it went the other way. So that's what Celeste Ng is postulating. It's
Right.
like, what if it goes the other way?
Right.
People are more siding
Gotcha.
with the affluent family as opposed to the people who originally had the baby. And in the case of Little Fires Everywhere, it's also about the ethnicity and is the cultural heritage of who you are. Is it necessary for the parents to have that? And is that important? Or like in the book, it's like, she's just like, well, we have been raising this baby for a year. We adopted it through legal means. Somebody left it on the fire station steps. Should it go back to this mother who was clearly negligent and gave it up just because she comes back now and wants it? Like, we're not Chinese, but we can easily learn. And it's interesting because in the 90s, sort of pseudo Shaker Heights racist way, they're like, well, we got her a panda bear instead of a teddy bear, stuff like that.
I think that's the particularly poignant things that I keep hearing about as I was looking into this is that the way that she exemplified the pseudo racism of the adoptive parents of being like, well, we gave her a panda instead of a teddy bear. We're gonna have Chinese art throughout the house. Of being like, these are, I guess, the best that these people could do at the time, and this is what we're talking about, is highlighting how this just falls so short of actually understanding anybody from their point of view at all.
Yeah.
Instead of just pretending we're all the same and everybody lives like you.
Yeah. In an interview, Celeste was saying, she was like, I thought maybe that was too far or unrealistic, but she was like, when I was growing up, my mother bought tons of children's books just to try and find one that had an Asian character in it. Or she tried to buy me an Asian doll or an Asian Barbie, but there weren't any. So she got me a black doll because at least it wasn't blonde.
Yeah.
At the same time, there is the question, which I think, like I said, I don't see the balance of these parents still have the ability to care for this kid and this mother who has loved this kid. And my criticism of it is like, by the end, situations happen and they adopt another kid. And it's like, well, then does that mean that just like an adopted kid is interchangeable?
Right.
And like, what is motherhood? Like, she brings up these questions, but it
is
doesn't.
Asking the question, does that automatically mean you fully see the situation and can comment on it? Like, we can ask the question, but is that really getting at it all? Is that really,
or what is Celeste's perspective?
Really a full dynamic assessment of what's going on? And I think ultimately is no, but I think that's the use of good art, is to be asking those questions, and that hopefully the next one comes along and maybe can have another piece of this puzzle that maybe perhaps this one is missing. And it's so interesting to hear that the book feels a little more pointed, where the
to me at least,
totally, where I feel like the show, I'm deliberately blinded and I'm being shown people's backgrounds at the precise moment. And they have 10 episodes to kind of go into all of these thematics. And we haven't even gotten to a whole other major storyline here. They have 10 episodes to dedicate an hour to each one of these storylines, each one of these dynamics, all of these characters. It actually, the way this plot moves, sounds like it is more suited for a series, actually. It's very particular in where it's very siloed in the way it's looking. It's it's very withholding of what information it's wanting to get across.
The way that I saw it was kind of this concept of altruism actually being manipulation, which to me, like by the end of this book, I'm like, well, this whole thing's a tragedy because nobody has really learned this lesson.
Right.
Like nobody has moved from understanding, and in the book, I think it is definitely taking a side that, I mean, just for example, the dedication of the book at the very front is to those out on their own paths setting little fires. So clearly, and she is an author who her parents were living in Shaker Heights on the grind, and now she's living this artistic, creative, bohemian lifestyle.
Yeah,
and
she came from the affluent family. I mean, they were still minorities, but they were affluent. They were well off and studied, and that's where she's coming from. So it's odd You know, it's an interesting thing to have the other family point of view stuck right in the middle of that. What does that disruption actually look like?
Yeah.
The next major piece of this is, I think, a reflection of the kids through the mothers. So the Reese Witherspoon character has 2 daughters. One is just like her, one is not. And that is a lot of drama in the first few episodes. And I think that the other daughter becomes the centerpiece for drama through the back end of the show, as the other daughter ends up getting pregnant and has an abortion. In the show, she takes Pearl, the African American girl, the daughter, to help with, you know, just emotionally get her through the abortion. And Pearl realizes that her name is on all the paperwork, and that the Reese Witherspoon daughter panicked and is putting the wrong name on everything on purpose. They go back to Mia, and Mia realizes what's happened, takes her in, and this is where I looked into this. This is where it seems to diverge from the book. In the book, Mia is very warm, very receptive as the mom, taking it all in, hearing it all, and being empathetic. That's not the way it goes in this one. Again, in the book, she is not a black mother.
Yeah.
I found a Washington Post article that actually touched on the decision to move the artist family into an African American ethnicity, and it centers around this plot line. It came down to, if the white daughter uses the name of somebody for the abortion, that means the name doesn't matter, and by extension that person doesn't matter. If you take that problem to a white mother working for a white family, she probably will have a different reaction. She'll be a little more empathetic. She'll listen to it all. A black mother, perhaps, and this is the conversation they had in the writer's room, a black mother would immediately see that their daughter was marginalized. And the scene that happens in the show is an indictment of what the white daughter has just done, trying to get across, and that the central conflict between these two families is, and why they decided to move it into African American space here for these characters, is it's a very different reaction. And if we don't go there, is it really authentic? They asked themselves those questions in the writer's room, and realized that where they had found themselves narratively at this point could change radically if you change the ethnicity. They were able to dredge up more authentic drama in this by posing that question than if they had just strictly followed the book. I think it's really fascinating, actually.
Yeah. I think the big theme that's tying in with all this stuff, which I think maybe is what the book was trying to go for most, is about mothers and daughters.
Yeah.
And part of the tragedy is rejecting what your mothers give you.
Yeah.
Which I know.
Like the closest I can do is like, maybe I'm with my father. You know, like, we're trying our best as white cis men trying to understand these issues. But this is very much a mother-daughter story, so we're trying to tap into it the way that we know. So,
in Celeste's words, things are more complicated, and maybe there's more to other people than we thought there was. And so I think that's why it's such a hard piece to critique as being like, oh, it's about this. Because she's trying to say, well, I'm trying to take everything from all different angles and not really present you with any answers. And say, well, you thought this person was being altruistic, but they had the same problem in their life and is trying to validate their choices. And maybe this person who's really rebellious and bohemian is raising their daughter, and all that daughter wants is to be like Mrs. Richardson, because her life is not moving around in a VW bus every 2 months.
And that's interesting just on a class level. If you add the race aspect to that, my God, you're exponentially increasing the drama here. I mean, I just want to pat them on the back for understanding what that meant, what that could mean for the narrative.
I found an essay that Celeste Ng wrote that I think encapsulates a lot of this, and something that I was thinking about when I was reading this. And so I'm glad that I was just like, oh, here it is. Because
cool. Yeah, I love when that happens, man. I so often I feel like I'm just sitting alone at night, just like at midnight, just like wondering a thought about the world, and then like a week later, I'll read a news article that's like this was happening in France, and I'm like, what? So I just love when it's like, is this what yes, here it is. This is the confirmation. You were the sneaking suspicion turned proof positive
by the author herself. she had written an essay, which I'll post a link to, called Why We Need Fiction in a World of Memoirs. And it's this big treatise in terms of, in Celeste's words, unlike a memoirist who promises to tell the truth, the fiction writer says, I'm going to tell you a lie, but at the end you'll feel that it's true. So by its nature, a memoirist says, this happened, this really happened, I must tell it, spurred by a desire to go on the record, but fiction's role is persuasive. Instead of memoir saying, I won't believe it until someone tells me that it really happened, and that's why it's salacious. Fiction says, I believe that this could happen, and you proved it to me, and that's why it's salacious.
There you go.
And it's a totally different skill set. And so I think it's interesting that she is geared towards that and still brings in a lot of her life. But I do think that that probably is lost, and we're seeing a lot of like, the Tiger King is huge right now, and it's but like if that was just an original series, might not be as cool. But it's the fact that it actually happened.
Right.
But,
I love the duality of that. Is that you
fiction,
can try to you can try as hard as you can to tell the truth, exactly what happened. But at the end of the day, you might end up telling a bigger lie, and you can try to tell a lie the whole time and wind up actually getting somebody to feel something more authentic. It's bananas.
And we covered
I love that.
in a crazy flashback to one of our less listened to episodes. JT Leroy was all about this fictional memoir.
There we go. Yeah, perfect. That's perfect episode for that. Yeah, JT Leroy is all about the practicality, the use, the tool of narrative.
And I think Celeste Ng employs that very well, even though she's covering a lot of issues. It was something that I had been thinking about of like, okay, this is about a town that she grew up in. Were there situations that happened like this? And she is adamantly like, I'm writing fiction because I'm trying to persuade you this could happen. And what does that make you feel?
Maybe that's why she didn't do the murders. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
That's where immediately where I go to is like, what? That's what ultimately she wanted to talk about these things. And I'm really thankful that in this time right now, I've got something fresh, feminine to go to. I'm behind on Big Little Lies, but I'm glad that this is hot. This is part of the conversation right now.
And if you're into stories of motherhood women, like things that are not usually represented in typical Hollywood fashion, Reese Witherspoon's production company, Hello Sunshine, they also have a book club where they feature only books written by women about women.
Oh, that's tight.
Like, she's on this game.
Yeah.
So that's why we were excited to talk about this, because here is something, if you feel like this is a space that's lacking, she's full force trying to put this into the forefront.
Yeah, that's super cool. A couple announcements.
Yeah.
We did another show for April 1st. Taylor, you got the details on that?
Yeah, it's called Judge a Book. We did it through the app Pocket Casts, which is a great app to listen to podcasts, but wherever you're listening is fine too. But we did a promo with them, so we made a whole fake podcast.
Judge a book by its cover.
Where we judge a book by its cover. It goes off the rails. If you missed it for April 1st, April Fool's, it's still up. You just have to search Judge a Book on any podcast platform and you can listen to it. It's just us having a little bit of fun.
And we wanted to give a shout out to our international listeners and make a pledge that we're going to try to do some more internationally themed content. That we're not going to try to focus on the U.S. too much. We're still going to touch on the U.S., but we're going to we're always trying to broaden the scope of the show.
We have had people reach out to us. Baby. Yeah, we've had people reach out to us from Turkey, from Central America, from all over the world saying they listen, they love it. So we're gonna we hear you.
That's just giving us a confidence to expand our purview here, trying to what more stories
film
can
literature
we find.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So get in touch with us. Let us know what you're excited about, what you're reading, what you're listening to, what you're watching.
We will catch you all next week.